Shoot. All right, prayer requests. Yes. It's a great niece. Good night. Mm. Oh, they have to do surgery on her. Oh, wow. Mm. Mm-mm-mm.
We need to pray for those people in Ukraine.
Yeah.
I'm telling you that's a mess over there.
Yeah. Yep. That's for sure. Yeah, all those folks and just the war and everybody involved. Yeah, not a good deal. Jen and I've got a friend that's having surgery. Supposed to have it today, and it got postponed till tomorrow. So we just need to remember her in prayer. No, just a friend of ours. Yeah, just a friend of ours. Yep. And I guess talked to Norm Sunday, uh, and their crew's been down and sick, and I guess Liza's doing better, but Norm's still kind of fighting through it. So yeah, he said he was going to hold out yet tonight just because he didn't want to make sure he didn't get anybody else sick. So. She forgot. I'm going to have to speak up because you forgot your hearing aids. So if I shout, it's for you. It's not because I'm mad. All right. Dennis, would you lead us in prayer?
Father, we come to you tonight in Jesus' name. We want to thank you for this day. Thank you, Father, for the privileges that we've got to be here. Father, to meet on a prayer. Thank you. Father, I pray that you give us better understanding of these things, the freedoms and the grace and the love that you show us each day. Father, as we talk about prayer requests, people sick, people in other countries having problems. None of this catches you by surprise, Father, and I do understand that you're still in control. Father, I pray that you help us to, Father, continue to seek your guidance and your will in everything that we do. Pray for those people on me tonight as we help them as he reveals your word to us, that we may gain this better understanding of you, that we may arm ourselves, Father, to be your warriors. Thank you for this. Go with us now tonight. In Jesus' name.
Amen. All right. Yeah, you can, I guess. Might help them out a little bit. All right. That help? Does that help any? Y'all for hearing? Yeah. We'll get some headphones for him. All right, 1 Samuel. We need to remember to pray for getting all that stuff shipped to Haiti as well. That's not gonna, which we didn't figure is going to be an easy thing, but we just need to pray that all that stuff gets worked out with getting it all in containers and getting somebody that can get it through customs and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, they call them logistic companies that can sort of contract that out from the beginning to the end, and we've kind of worked some of that out from here out of customs on the boat to Haiti, but we still need to try and get it so that they can get it through customs in Haiti and to the right port because it doesn't need to be Port-au-Prince, so to the right port for them. Yeah, it's probably gonna, for a whole container. I hate to even say, I don't know exactly, but probably on our side, I'm guessing 5,000 to 6,000 maybe on our side to get it on the boat and whatever. And I don't know yet to get the customs stuff, which, it's a lot. Yeah, I guess you divide it up by all the stuff you've got in there, and that helps, with how much it's actually costing. But
I don't mind you double stacking.
yeah, we're trying to think through that too, how we can best stack them and load them up and all that kind of stuff. So probably, my guess right now is what might happen is we may try and get a container here that we're just renting for a month or two, load it all up, get it, whereas we know we got it good, and then can ship it and all that. So, but anyway, but they gave me a list too of all the other stuff that they could use to help finish up a container. But anyway, that just need to continue to remember that in prayer as well. 1 Samuel 21. Last week we were talking about the kind of the last time that David had with Jonathan, and now we're going to go into David, really his wilderness, humbling experience. A lot of where we get the Psalms is going to come from this time in David's life, and we'll actually probably look at that a little bit today as well. 21:1, then David came to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech came trembling to meet David and said to him, "Why are you alone and no one with you?" Now underline that, came trembling, okay? Because this is sort of giving you insight into what's the state in relation to Saul. David said to Ahimelech the priest, "The king has commissioned me with a matter and has said to me, 'Let no one know anything about the matter on which I am sending you and with which I have commissioned you, and I have directed the young men to a certain place.'" So again, some of this you may not really have stopped and think about because you may know the story, but it gives a lot of insight into what the situation is. The priest believes that David is loyal to Saul. Remember, Saul is the one who Jonathan says to Saul, "What's David done that warrants you trying to kill him?" Well, the priest here sees David as loyal to Saul, and so his trembling is not because David's on the run and Saul's out to kill him, and if he helps David, then he's in jeopardy. Why is he trembling then? He's in fear of Saul. Yeah, Saul has turned into a tyrant king. So it connects us to Judges, and when you see the judges that became just tyrants and up to no good, Saul is in that state. And do what? He's just like them. Yep, that's exactly right. He's just like them. And so we were talking about this earlier today. The people asked for a king and wanted a king just like them, and they got it. And so now there's fear in their hearts because of the type of king they have, namely Saul. And remember, this isn't just commoners. This is the priest. So it's become very. Well, that's the other part of it. Why would a priest be scared of Saul? If Saul would be righteous, what would he have to be scared of? So a lot of it falls in line too. We're going to get to the point where we talk, when David is always listed as a man after God's own heart, we're going to talk about exactly what that means. Yeah, we'll talk later on about what exactly that means. But Saul, you see, is not that case. The other thing is, a lot of times we think about right here that David is alone, but David actually has people with him. Yeah. So apparently there are some there who either fear for their life because of Saul, or they're being loyal to David, and they understand and see what's going on. They've chosen to go with David rather than to go with Saul. So David shows up with some of these young men, and the priest comes out. He's in fear of his life because he's thinking maybe Saul sent them, and is asking what's going on. David, in essence, says, no, Saul put us on a secret mission. So we had to, nobody knows about it. I'm telling you as priest, but Saul sent us on a secret mission. So that's why all of a sudden we showed up. So he says, therefore, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread and whatever can be found. The priest answered David and said, there is no ordinary bread on hand, but there is consecrated bread, if only the young men have kept themselves from women. David answered the priest and said to him, surely women have been kept from us, as previously when I set out, and the vessels of the young men were holy, though it was an ordinary journey, how much more than today will their vessels be holy? Now, a couple of things. Remember, this is being descriptive, not prescriptive. So the difference is it may be describing a scene, but that's not necessarily prescribing, saying this is what you do everywhere, always. So this is an abnormal thing that's happening, and it's describing, the event. So the priests are concerned because David's asked for holy bread that's supposed to end up going to the Levites, not to David. Right? Now, this is not the showbread that is in the presence of the Lord. It's the bread that's been replaced. But it's still supposed to, after that, go to the Levites. It's not supposed to go to anybody else. So the priest, whenever he asks for that, he looks to David and says, well, but in essence, are they clean? What they mean by clean is, have they set themselves aside? Have they set themselves aside? You don't just eat of the Lord's bread without being sober in what it is that you're doing. It's not common, right? It's not common. So it's not that you're cleaning yourself up in order to make yourself worthy to eat. It's that you don't just eat unaware of what it is that you're actually doing. Because what you're doing is not something that we would normally do, right? So it's a very weird thing that's happening. So the priest gave him consecrated bread, for there was no bread there but the bread of the presence, which was removed from before the Lord, in order to put hot bread in its place when it had been taken away. So that was the only bread that they had. And David says, hey, I don't have time. We got to go. The only bread they've got, so they go. Now, do you remember this comes up in the New Testament? Do y'all remember that when this comes up? Y'all remember the account when he turned the air conditioner on to wake everybody up? Anybody remember when this came up? Yeah, the disciples were going through the fields picking grain, and with Jesus, and the Pharisees said, "What are you doing? You're not supposed to do that on the Sabbath." And Jesus brings up and says, "Don't you remember David?" Why would he bring up? Why would he? There's a million things he could have brought up. Why would he bring up David? Because David is the standard. Yeah, David is the standard. How can I accuse you if I can't accuse David? If what you're saying is right about David, then I can't accuse you in that what you're doing. So that's going to be important, because later on we're going to see David is the standard, which means we're going to have to really understand what does it mean for him to be a man after God's own heart. Yeah, in relation to that. And then Jesus, in essence, says the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Right? So Christ comes underneath the statement of the law and looks at the spirit and intent of the law as to why it was given. Anytime you're thinking about law is not bad. Okay? Law is not bad. It's not a bad. Paul doesn't think it's bad. Moses doesn't think it's bad. But law is not bad. Especially and primarily when you stop and you think about the spirit of the law. Never, ever, 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 ever lose the spirit of the law. Because what happens is people will look to law to save you, and law never was meant to save you. Law gives you boundaries and a line that help you distinguish where you are at, where people are at. But if you lose the spirit as to why the law was given, the law becomes something it was never meant to be. You're expecting life to be in law that's never there. So Pharisees thought that if they kept law, they would find life. And Jesus is saying, no, 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 no. Life is in the person who gave the law, and the spirit of the law from him who gave it is this. So anytime you're dealing with kids, grandkids, other people, all that kind of stuff, you want to look underneath and say, you give a command or you give something to be obeyed, and then you go underneath it and you say, what's the spirit as to why I gave that? Or are we just given law to give law? So, just a real important principle that comes out here, because this is extraordinary circumstances. The principle underneath the law allows for the priest to be able to provide for David in this particular case. Yeah. And Jesus then uses it in the New Testament. If he didn't use it in the New Testament, you'd look at this and you would interpret this a whole lot different. Yeah, in terms of this priest. So, now one of the servants of Saul, verse 7, was there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg the Edomite, the chief of Saul's shepherds. David said to Ahimelech, now is there not a spear or a sword on hand? For I brought neither my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's matter was urgent. Now, the king's matter was urgent, but it was urgent in what way? Yeah, because the king's matter was kill me. So he takes flight with all of these men, and they have no weapons. So they don't have provisions, they don't have weapons, they're fugitives, in essence. Now notice what happens. The priest said, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, with whom you killed in the valley of Elah, behold, it is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you will take it for yourself, take it, for there is none other except it here. David said, there is none like it, give it to me. So David, while he is a fugitive, takes the sword of his greatest victory up to this point. You can talk about mixed emotions, right? What are you thinking when you take the sword of Goliath and you went back to Israel and everybody's cheering your name, and now you're on the run from the very king from whom you saved by the hand of that sword? So it's just, what the world. Then David arose and fled that day from Saul and went to Achish, king of, what happened in Gath? Yeah, the ark. And where's Goliath from? So David is on flight. He goes to the priest. He gets Goliath's sword that he killed Goliath with, and he leaves there and goes to the city of Goliath with Goliath's sword. How's that going to turn out? What are the Philistines going to do when they see Goliath's sword coming with David? But here's the reason I say that. It's important to notice all of this, because otherwise you don't understand how desperate of a state David was in. Yeah. You don't make moves like this if you're not at the end of your road. If you're going to go to the very city of the greatest warrior that the Philistines had, and you're going to carry your sword with you. So he goes there. The servants of Achish said to him, "Is this not David, the king of the land?" They acknowledge him as king. Did they not sing of this one as they danced, saying, "Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s"? So they bring back to memory the battle with Goliath. David took these words to heart and greatly feared Achish, king of Gath. So when David hears that, he says, "Oh, guess what? They're fixing to kill me." So he disguised his sanity before them and acted insanely in their hands, scribbled on the doors of the gate, let his saliva run down into his beard. Achish said to his servants, "Behold, you see the man behaving as a madman? Why do you bring him to me? Do I lack madmen? Then you have brought this one to act the madman in my presence. Shall this one come into my house?" So, yeah. Any of y'all want to demonstrate what what that scene was like? All right. Yeah. Craziness. Now go to Psalm 34. Somebody have a inscription above the chapter? Can you read that? Dave, would you read that to us?
Of David, when he pretended to be insane before Abimelech and drove him away and hid him.
So this psalm comes from David from that event. So when David's a fugitive, on the run from Saul, takes Goliath's sword, goes into the hands of the Philistines. The Philistines are going to kill him. He acts like a madman, foaming at the mouth, scribbling on the gates. This psalm comes from that. So make a note of that at the top of the chapter. And then read to see if this sounds like him. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall be continually in my mouth. This is coming from when you were foaming at the mouth. My soul will boast in the Lord. But then look what he says in verse 2. The humble will hear it and... Yeah. David, one of the things that David is seeing is the purpose behind what God's doing in humbling him as he's moving forward through in this path. Now, realize that this psalm more than likely wasn't written in the middle of when he was doing this. So in the moment, he is in such distress. He has no food, no provisions, very few men who are backing him, has to deceive the priest. He gets food that he shouldn't get, sword that is Goliath's not his, goes to Goliath's hometown, the king of the Philistines, and all of the people are ready to kill him, and he has to act like he is insane, foaming at the mouth. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. They looked to him and were radiant, and their faces will never be ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he rescues them. Taste and see that the Lord is good. I don't imagine that people who hang that on their wall think about, humble me, Lord, so that I can taste and see that you are good. O taste and see that the Lord is good. How blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. Fear the Lord, you his saints, for to those who fear him there is no want. Young lions lack and suffer hunger, but they who seek the Lord shall not be in want for any good thing. Come, children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Who is the man who desires life and loves length of days that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil, your lips from speaking deceit. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace, pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are towards the righteous, and his ears are open to their cry. The face of the Lord is against evildoers, to cut off the memory of them from the earth. The righteous cry, and the Lord hears, and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. He keeps all his bones, not one of them is broken. Evil shall slay the wicked. Those who hate the righteous will be condemned. The Lord redeems the soul of his servants, and none of those who take refuge in him will be condemned. If our we don't have to look for trouble, if you will, for it to find us. But if our greatest value is to alleviate pain, in seeking to alleviate pain, we also lose often the presence of the Lord. Because when David experiences the Lord to the greatest depth, it's in the middle of affliction and pain. And it's how he knows who God is. So a lot of times when we talk about trusting in God, or we talk about believing in God, we talk about sensing the presence of God, we do it in the sense that seeks to only have good as we see good. But David comes in here and says, at my greatest need, God was there. And through my greatest affliction, God showed up. And when God showed up, I experienced God in a much greater, deeper way than I ever could have had I not gone through that. There's only one way to know God like that, right? And that's through those kind of hardships. So at the beginning of David's fugitive years, if you will, you see that he is in an incredibly difficult place, to the point in which the man who crowds and women yelled his name, chanted his name, he before them faked insanity. Yeah. So it's an incredibly humbling experience for David. But the king says, I got plenty of crazy people around me. I don't need any more crazy people. So why don't you go ahead and take him off? We don't even have to worry about him. David must be a pretty good actor, right? He must be a pretty good actor. So back to chapter 22, 1 Samuel 22. So as David departed from there, he escaped to the cave of Adullam, and when his brothers and all of his father's household heard of it, they went down there to him. A lot of people forget that when Saul is after David, Saul's not just after David, he's after his entire household. If our decisions only affected us, it would make our decisions easier, but your decisions never only affect you. I always wonder, what would that be like? To be standing at the cave and see your brothers and your dad coming, who are now fugitives because Saul is out to kill you. I mean, what does that greeting look like? They lose their homes, they lose their property, they lose their livelihood, and they're now come to the person who's created all this mess. We already know that it's not like David's got a great relationship with his brothers anyway, right? Because when he went to kill the battle with Goliath, they're saying you're selfish and just looking out for yourself. I imagine that was a great greeting with the brothers, right? We knew you would do this to us, right? Verse 2. Everyone who was, and underline, in distress, everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was discontent. The 3 Ds. David's men, all of them the 3 Ds. Distressed, debt, discontent. Gathered to him, and he became captain over them. This might be one of the greatest verses of all time. So if you do, highlight that verse, because later on we're going to read about David's mighty men, and they are going to be the Navy SEALs of the Navy SEALs. Our Navy SEALs wouldn't want to mess with them, and they came from this group. So the Proverbs talks about how God raises up the humble. In the midst of humbling David, he is also developing an army, and David is extending leadership in a bad situation. Bad leadership oftentimes blames circumstances for their problems, while good leadership works through those circumstances and develops people that are in the midst of those circumstances and in the midst of those problems. Leadership, whenever you have hard times around you, good leadership always rises to the top. Always rises to the top. Bad leadership will find reasons and excuses as to why this doesn't work. And they'll blame everything else. David gets the worst of the worst. And it's going to be the core of his, it's going to end up being the core of his army. Yeah. So.
You can't imagine what they went through if you think about it, because you ever seen what the Navy SEALs go through? It's unbelievable, because in San Diego they make them swim all the way across that bay. And they pick them up with a helicopter. And they hang onto a rope. And they carry them all the way back. And then swim back across that bay.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second time you have to swim back from that. Some of them don't make it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder what as strong
Yeah.
as, I guess, heroic, you could say, as these guys are. What in the world did they go through?
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody likes and even Israel itself totally misses seeing David's humbling time. But it's that humbling time that developed him to become a leader. I think that you see more in this with David than you do even with Moses. Everybody talks about Moses. Yeah, Moses in the 40 years to develop him to be the leader to lead Israel for the next 40 years. But I think that you see much more insight into David being developed as a leader than what you do even with Moses for those 40 years. Well, Saul, I think, if I remember right, Saul reigned about 40 years. So it wasn't all of that time. But I'll look and see. I don't remember exactly. Yeah. So there's about 400 men with him. David went from there to Mizpah of Moab. Now, what do we know about Moab already? We had a book written about somebody who was from Moab. Ruth. Yep. Ruth. So Ruth the Moabitess. So Ruth, David's got probably has got family connections with people in Moab. Yeah, through Ruth. So he said to king of Moab, "Please let my father and my mother come and stay until I know what God will do for me." He left them and the king of Moab, and they stayed with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. I didn't have time to look at it, but I don't recall that does David ever see his parents again? Does anybody know? I don't recall that it says that he ever did on that when he left them there. So the prophet Gad said to David, "Do not stay in the stronghold, depart and go to the land of Judah." So David departed and went to the forest of Hereth. So David basically seeks safety with some of the people in Judah. So Saul hears, verse 6, that David and the men who were with him had been discovered. Saul was sitting in Gibeah under the tamarisk tree on the height with his spear in his hand, and all of his servants were standing around him. Saul said to his servants who stood around him, "Hear now, O Benjaminites, will the son of Jesse also give to all of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you all commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? All of you have conspired against me, so that there is no one who discloses to me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse, and there is none of you who is sorry for me or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in ambush as it is this day." Whose fault is this? See the difference? Saul is the one who is in the earth's economy would be considered in a position of strength. Who's going to give you land? Son of Jesse going to give you land? He's on the run. He can't give you land. Who's going to give you homes? Who's going to give you vineyards? Who's going to give you people to go and fight with? Son of Jesse going to do that? No, he ain't going to do that. I'm the one who's strong, and yet you do this to me. Saul's a mess. Yep, he's an absolute mess. So he has somehow found out about the covenant that Jonathan made. Doeg the Edomite, who was standing by the servants of Saul, said, "I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub. He inquired of the Lord for him, gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath, the Philistine." So he waits until he finds out exactly what's the right response to the king, because he didn't want to die. And when he finds out what's the right response for the king, then he tells him what he saw in relation with David. Now, what's an Edomite? Remember when Israel was going to go, and there were Edomites that inhabited the land, descendants of Esau? And what did God say? Don't mess with them, they're brothers. Right? But this one's not, he's not acting like a brother. Yep, he's not acting like a brother. So the king sent someone to summon Ahimelech. Now remember, Ahimelech is a descendant of Eli. Remember Eli the priest? So the king summoned someone summon Ahimelech the priest, son of Ahitub, and all of his father's household, the priests who were in Nob, and all of them came to the king. And Saul said, "Listen now, son of Ahitub." And he answered, "Here I am." Saul said to him, "Why have you and the son of Jesse conspired against me, and that you have given him bread and sword, and have inquired of God for him, so that he would rise up against me by lying in ambush as it is this day?" Ahimelech answered the king and said, "Who among all of your servants is as faithful as..." How does Ahimelech see David's relationship and loyalty to Saul? He sees it as he's done nothing wrong. "Even the king's son-in-law, who is captain over your guard and is honored in your house. Did I just begin to inquire of God for him today? Far be it from me. Do not let the king impute anything to his servant, or to any of the household of my father, for your servant knows nothing at all of this whole affair." The king said, "You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all of your father's household." And the king said to the guards who were attending him, "Turn around, put the priests of the Lord to death, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew that he was fleeing and did not reveal it to me." But the servants of the king were not willing to put forth their hand to attack the priests of the Lord. Then the king said to Doeg, "Turn around and attack the priest." And Doeg the Edomite turned around, attacked the priest, and killed that day 85 men who wore the linen ephod. You've seen some of these movies where they'll come in to a service like this, and they'll lock the back doors, and they'll burn the church down with the people in it. That's pretty close to this. That's pretty close to this. So he struck Nob, the city of the priests, with the edge of the sword, men, women, children, infants. Oxen, donkeys, sheep, he struck with the edge of the sword. He had no mercy. No mercy. But one son of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, you're going to want to underline, circle that, and put a star next to it, escaped, and he fled after David. Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. David said to Abiathar, "I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, and I have brought about the death of every person in your father's household. Stay with me, do not be afraid, for he who seeks my life seeks your life, for you are safe with me." So through the death of the entire priesthood there, God gives David a priest who is Abiathar, who is a descendant of Eli. Now, what do we know about Eli? What do we know about Eli with his sons? He wasn't a good father. His sons were evil. And God said, because you're not willing to stand by me, be loyal to me, your line is going to end. Remember we talked about that? And in one day, he lost both of his sons. But we said, but don't think, most people think that that's when his line ended. But that's not when his line ended, because it's carried out right here. And Abiathar is a descendant of Eli, who now is David's priest, and he's going to be David's priest all the way through. But what happens when David dies? Do you know? Yeah. When David is just about to die, you remember it? Everybody talks about this story because they're like, "Oh, this," you know. They take the concubine. He's about to die, and they take the concubine, who is a beautiful woman, the Shemunite woman, to lay with him. But he didn't lay. I mean, he didn't sleep with her, right? And then Solomon's brother tries to take the kingdom. And Bathsheba steps in and says, "Ho, ho, 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 Nathan, David's fixing to die. He never anointed my son Solomon, whom he promised to be the next king, and he's fixing to die, and brother over here is fixing to take the whole kingdom." Well, Nathan says, "Go talk to the king. I'll go talk to the king." Both of them go talk to David. In essence, David then comes out and says, "Solomon's going to be the next king." Well, brother hears about it. Joab's with him. Abiathar is with him, because they all are trying to make him the next king. When they hear about it, his brother goes and grabs the altar. Says, have mercy on me. Saul, whoa, 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 Solomon, don't kill me, don't kill me, don't kill me, don't kill me. Solomon says, we'll see whether or not you're worthy not to die. Go home, in essence. He then, his brother, Solomon's brother, goes to Bathsheba and says, Solomon's going to kill me. Let me make a request. And he says, let me have the concubine that laid with David. And Bathsheba makes the request to Solomon. Solomon's ticked. And he says to his mother, he says, you want me to give him Abiathar and Joab as well? And because what he's saying is, you want me to give him the kingdom? And he goes and he kills Abiathar. Because he's being loyal to his brother rather than who God anointed himself, Solomon. And it says, when he did, it was in fulfillment of what God had said way back when to Eli. Yep. So David's fugitive act is the beginning of the end of the priesthood that happened way back when, all the way back there when Hannah was there with Hannah's prayer looking forward to Messiah and all things to come about. So when you're I was reading, I think it was today, the proverb that says that man rolls the dice. I love this passage. Man rolls the dice. Its every decision is from the Lord. This is random. It's every decision is from the Lord. Now, that's not, all you guys, that's not for y'all to go to the casino and pray, blow on this and pray that God brings me whatever, snake eyes or whatever it is you're looking for, right? There can be, you can be in the middle of what feels like is absolute, out of control, God is nowhere to be found, faking madness because you're a fugitive, in flight, trying to care for your parents, in the midst of having the most wild, discontented group ever that comes into your camp, and think God is nowhere to be found in any of this. And God is right dead in the middle of it.
The lot is cast into the lap. Every decision is
Yeah. Yep. There's a scene in The Patriot where his Gibson and his boy are there, and they just had this huge defeat. He tells everybody to go home, take a week off. Whoever wants to come back, and all this kind of stuff. And actually, it's when they first were recruiting people. And these guys were coming in, and they were the worst of the worst. I mean, they were wild, out of control bunch. And he says the son says to Dad, "These aren't the people that we need." And he looks at him and says, "These are exactly the people that we need." And if anybody looked at the people that God is giving to David, at this point they would say, "These aren't the people that we would need." And God is saying, "No, these are exactly the people that you need." So, yeah, it's amazing, the undercurrent of what's going on. It's amazing if you look back and you look forward to see God's hand was in the whole thing. There was never a point in which God's hand was not in it. But if you're David in the middle of it, you don't feel that way. Because you're holding Goliath's sword and all you remember is that victory march. And now you're on the run. And now you're acting like you're crazy. You don't feel like it. It's the reason you've got to be careful whenever you start talking about open doors, closed doors, because most of what we feel like is closed doors are God's doors that He's kicking you through. Yeah. They're not necessarily things that we would choose, but what God has us go through, that is the very thing that develops us into the people that He's called us to be. And He's certainly in pursuit of that. So let's pray. Father God, grateful for this day, grateful for your word and just all the insights that you provide for us through people who've gone before us, and Father, hard things for certain. But Father, we pray that you carry us through those things recognizing all of the good that you do through it and with it, not just because of it. You actually do good because of it. Things that we don't like but we need, and how that you're never removed from those things. You are in the hardest of times, and even when we don't get the answers necessarily that we like, we still can trust that you are there with us, and that those things are not something you simply allow, but you're carrying us through. And so as we go through this time of David's life, I pray that you'd help us to see that, trust you in and through that, just through the everyday affairs of life. These things we pray in your Son's holy name. Amen.